Chances are you have seen a Toyota commercial, or perhaps noticed the surging popularity of Toyota vehicles in the United States. Toyota employs one of the top advertising agencies on the planet, Tokyo-based Dentsu Inc. Thanks to Mr. Tim Andree's leadership, in just 2 years, Dentsu America has mirrored its client Toyota in achieving record levels of sustainable growth and profitability. In just 2 years, as the first American CEO of Dentsu's U.S. operations, Mr. Andree led a remarkable drive in recruiting, consolidation, and winning new clients in the U.S. that included such major brand names as Coca-Cola and Adidas. Andree's career path is quite unique. After graduating from Notre Dame in 1983 with a degree in economics, he was drafted by the Chicago Bulls and went on to play in Spain, Italy, Monaco, and Japan professionally. In Japan, he worked as the first ever American expatriate staff member for Toyota and assisted the Japanese government in overseas planning. In 1990, Andree returned to the U.S. to serve as a top communications executive at Toyota, Canon USA, BASF Corporation, and the National Basketball Association. In June of this year, he was appointed as the first non-Japanese executive officer of Dentsu Incorporated in the company's 107-year history. Andree serves on the board of directors for the Doe Fund and is a member of the Arthur W. Page Society, the Wiseman, the University of Notre Dame Monogram Club, and is a trustee of the Jersey Shore Athletic Association. Andree married his Notre Dame sweetheart, Laureen, with whom he chases their 6 children around the basketball court at their home in Colts Neck, New Jersey. He lived in Pangbourne when he was here at Notre Dame, and his son Tim was in Keenan. We even have his yearbook picture. He played basketball. Let's welcome Mr. Tim Andree.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Can everyone hear me? Is this fine? Good. That shot went in, by the way. Well, I'm very, very pleased to be here for a whole host of reasons, and I'm hoping to have a great dialogue with everyone. I have about a 40-minute presentation, and what I usually talk about in these kind of settings, in fact, about 2 months ago, I was down at the Darden School and I gave this presentation, and it's a great presentation. It's got everything in it. It predicts what's happening with media fragmentation and how to do econometric models in the advertising industry. It talks about social networking, how it's changing the business. It's got a lot of stuff in that you could plagiarize for your papers. It's great. I'll make sure that it's available to you. But I'm not going to give it today. I'm not going to give it today because I'm under a heck of a lot more pressure than I usually am to deliver a better presentation and not something that's just rote. I'm feeling pressure today for 10 good David Letterman reasons. Right? First, I am a graduate. I came here in '83. I want to do a great job. Secondly, I married a graduate, as George said, and she was insisting that actually I do a better job than normal and not just mail this one in. Third, I used to play basketball here, and I was worried that Digger Phelps, who still lives in town, might actually show up. And since I performed so poorly in front of him before, I wanted to make sure that I actually did a better job today. Number 7, I really never dreamed when I was a student here that I'd ever be asked to come back and lecture to students at Mendoza, and I can guarantee you neither did any of my professors. So I want to take advantage of that opportunity. Number 5, I hear some of you are getting some credit for this class, so I want to make sure it has some value as a proud parent who's paying tuition here. Number 4, this is really personal. I've done a lot in my career. I'm 25 years since graduation. I called my mother last night, And I always try to tell her a little bit about what's going on in my career and all the nice things George said to me. And the career's gone very well, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years. And when I told her I was coming to lecture at Mendoza, she said, finally all those lights that I lit down at the grotto paid off. So if that's the case, then I better do a good job. Number 3, the last time I stood here, I was about 50 pounds lighter and I could dunk. Times change. Number 2, I have my son here, and I know he's sitting there incredibly worried that I'm going to say something here about myself that will, or perform in such a way that's going to embarrass him, so I have to do a good job. And then I know he's sitting there thinking that I'm going to say something about him that's going to embarrass him. So I'm really charged up to make sure that I do neither. So my son Tim's here. I also have my 14-year-old along with me, Danny. He's class of 2016, I think, something like that. So I've got a lot of reasons to do a good job today. I'm just really happy to be here. Again, as I go through what I'm talking about, I'll try to make some quick points, and then I'm really looking forward to handling any of your questions, even about the other presentation that I was planning to give. What Dean Gaglio actually asked me to speak about, which caused me to change my presentation, was kind of a subject I'm not that comfortable with. It's more about myself. The point he made to me was, hey, I'm kind of one of you. I went to class here. I worked as hard as I could, and that it may be instructive for me to tell you a little bit about my path, what I'm doing now, what I'm planning to do, and then any insights you can gather from that. So we affectionately entitled Getting From There to Here, right? Now, my assistant had a lot of fun finding old pictures. I kind of edited the ones where I looked a little goofy, but one way you get from there to here is, you let your hair go gray, you stop working out, you drink a lot of coffee and you don't eat well, and you get to here. But I think we mean more in a kind of a professional sense. So we'll talk a little bit about my path. I want to tell you a little bit about Dentsu. It's an amazing company with some amazing challenges right now that are really challenging everything challenging me in every way that I possibly could be challenged, in taxing everything I've learned thus far, and it's teaching me on a daily basis that I have a lot more to learn because things just keep changing. I'll get to a so what moment. I think every presentation ought to have that moment where you kind of say what you want to say, but then bring it back to, well, so what? What should you think about, or what should you care about? I'm going to talk a little bit about just one insight that I think is important for you, and then we'll get to your questions. So here's my path, right? My life reduced to a timeline. Kind of sad, isn't it? I was born in Detroit. I'm the youngest of 12 kids. I think everything that you have in your life is going to inform your personality. That certainly defined mine. As you can see, I'm a product of 16 years of Catholic education, but the biggest defining physical characteristic of my life is that I've always been very tall. For those of you that haven't figured it out yet, I'm 6'11". So I was a 6'6" 8th grader, right? That's how a kid from Detroit ends up going to one of the more expensive Catholic high schools in the suburbs of Detroit. You end up being a 6'6" 8th grader with a nice hook shot. Next thing you know, you can attend a school like Brother Rice. I probably have a similar background that most of you here. Like I said, 16 years of Catholic education, the nuns, the brothers, the jugs, the corporal punishment, the girls, the pimples, the recruiting. The big difference for me was I became a very, very good basketball player in high school, and I was recruited by everybody, literally everybody. It was kind of a bizarre time in my life from 75 to 79 before I came to Notre Dame. I was rated one of the top 5 basketball players in the country. And I came to the University of Notre Dame after, Dickie V, Dick Vitale, who was the coach at University of Detroit, pitched a tent on my front lawn for a week and did his radio show from there. And I had President Ford come to the house, former President Ford, and talk to my parents about me going to the University of Michigan. I had Dean Smith in. They had the whole crew. Real big, heady experience. And I ended up going to the University of Notre Dame because I'm the youngest of 12 kids with 2 older brothers that's a priest, a sister that's a nun, and a mom that goes to Mass every day. So Notre Dame is part of something I care about, something I deeply believe in, and I'm very glad I went here. But what happened at the University of Notre Dame? Who are the other 5 guys? Anybody remember Ralph Sampson? So the 5 best basketball players in the country in 1979, according to Parade and McDonald's: Ralph Sampson, Dominique Wilkins, James Worthy, Isaiah Thomas, and Tim Andree. Which doesn't belong and why? So I came here with every intent on being the next Larry Bird, and I thought I had good reason to believe that. And everything went wrong. Everything. I played poorly. We were on some good teams, but we had a couple of rough years. But suffice it to say, in the most affectionate term that all of the tough alumni and students use for the athletes around here, I was a bust. I did not meet the expectations as I was coming in here touted in high school. And I think that's important as you see what eventually happened in my career. I end up coming out of Notre Dame as a 5th-round draft pick of the Chicago Bulls. I forgot, my assistant added that. She was having a lot of fun with this presentation. So I end up coming out of school still trying to stick to my dream. I was drafted by the Chicago Bulls in the 5th round. When I was working for David Stern, he always reminded me that he actually eliminated all the rounds except 2, so the 5th round didn't really count. That's how far back in the draft I was. I ended up sticking around there for a little while, and then Kevin Lockery called me into his office one day and said, Tim, you have a great career ahead of you in business. So that didn't work. I went over to Italy. Great duty. Played in Trieste, Italy. Life in Italy was great. Making good money for a guy my age. Still determined to come back, play in the NBA. I went to the Knicks. Kind of the same result. Went back, played in Spain. Again, great duty. I was in Malaga, Spain. Anybody been to the Costa del Sol? Not a bad place, especially when you're, when you're young and all you have to do is play 2 hours of basketball a day. Still determined. I came back, tried out for the Hawks. They said no. Ended up doing 2 seasons in Monaco. That doesn't really sound like a bad thing, but for me and for my goals, it was really kind of spiraling down the ladder of basketball success. And I wanted to make a transition, and that's when I first started seriously thinking about what I was going to do besides play basketball. As life would have it, there was an opportunity in Japan. I ended up going and finishing my career in Japan. And the reason I did was totally planned. I wasn't over there for the joys of basketball at the time. This is 1985. Pax Nipponica had started. A Japanese business and management techniques were the rage. I thought I'd go over there, get some business experience, come back, go back to Detroit, get a nice job at Ford, and have a pretty good career. That was the plan at the time. The job was unusual in the sense that I was to play for their basketball team, but I was also supposed to work in the company. This building right here. Right? And this is where I started climbing back from a failed basketball career and still am proceeding on my climb towards the definition of success. In this office, I was the first American in 1985, first foreigner actually, working in their headquarters in Tokyo with all their overseas businesses. I worked in overseas planning, and then for 2 years, then I worked in overseas public affairs. I'm thinking in Japanese, sorry. I learned to speak Japanese while I was there, and I learned how to work, and it wasn't easy. When I got there, the Japanese were not really serious about letting me be a management trainee. I believe my first work rules when they said I should come in Tuesdays and Thursdays from 11 to 1. Right? So I've been over there about 3 weeks, and I figured out, geez, they want me to go to lunch with them twice a week so they could practice their English. So I just started showing up. I was in the overseas planning department. I started showing up at 7 o'clock every day. And at that time, there were telexes and faxes. coming in from Brussels and Washington, and I figured at least they were all in English. I figured, heck, at least I can read them all, summarize them, organize them, and show them that I was serious about business. It took a while, but eventually I worked my way into getting some real responsibilities, to the point where 5 years later, I had just a tremendous experience. They moved me to public affairs, where I started my career in communications, and I was working for the board at a time when Toyota was globalizing all its operations, moving tremendous amounts of production capacity overseas. They transferred me to New York, where eventually I became the head of all external communications for Toyota in the United States. So 14-year career with Toyota, started as a basketball player, right? This period of my career, in my path, I think is kind of where the career really begins. And I think, when you're in your 20s, you're building and you're educating. As you get into your 30s, you're really building your career, you're building your life. My experience at Toyota was fantastic. I was responsible for negotiating the incentives and eventually moving the production capacity to plants in Georgetown, Kentucky, Princeton, Indiana, and West Virginia. Toyota was a booming organization, and there was a lot of cultural issues and that all related to marketing and communicating how to move from an import to a domestic accepted brand here in America. Great assignment. I had a tremendous career there going for me. Decided to leave. Got recruited by Canon. The reason I left was because I was a corporate communications person who was blending into the marketing world, and I had the opportunity to run all of marketing for a diverse organization in a different industry. So I became the CMO of Canon in '98, spent 3 years there. Again, a great experience, largely trying to organize their communications into a big thought. They're in 17 different lines of business. How to organize that? I had a huge staff, huge budgets, and the mission then was to beat Sony. The CEO that brought me in basically gave me a blank check, and we did a heck of a lot of good work. Unfortunately, guess what happens? The CEO changed. A new CEO comes in, and he was not a marketer's orientation. He was a finance guy. And I knew I was in trouble in the first meeting when I showed him this brand new campaign that we were going to spend somewhere around $50 to $60 million on. He said, "Tim, I really like those advertisements, but you don't need all this money for media." And I sat there and said, "Well, what am I going to do? Wallpaper the offices with it, right?" That drove me to leave. At that time, I went and worked in venture capital for a couple of years. I took 3 companies public, 2 very successfully. Excuse me, not a couple of years, a couple of months. 7 months with a company called DGI. Made more money than I did in any other previous job, and was incredibly unhappy. Didn't like it. It's kind of a lone wolf existence. I think you have to produce things. For me, anyway, it wasn't right. But financially, it was good. I went from there to become the chief of communications for BASF. BASF's the world's largest chemical company. Chemicals have, as an industry, a tremendous amount of marketing and communications challenges. It was right for me to further develop as a marketer and a communicator, and I worked there for about a year. Probably the only thing I ever did to anybody that I feel somewhat bad. I only stayed there a year. They were extremely happy with me, and we were building a lot of programs. But then finally, almost 20 years after I wanted to play in the NBA, I get a call from David Stern. And I was offered the position to run communications and marketing for the NBA. And so I left BASF kind of in the lurch. Don't want to hop around jobs too much, and probably didn't stay there as long as they certainly wanted and expected me to. But I couldn't pass up the challenge of working at the NBA. And I ran all of the NBA's communications around the world, the television network, all of their programming and content and their marketing. And it was probably the job that prepared me better than or kind of was the icing on the cake in preparation for what I do now. Some of the biggest challenges I've ever faced in a career. So basically, if you think back to that period of time in NBA history, we had the Kobe rape trial. We had the Malice in the Palace, where there was a little altercation up there in Detroit that had to get managed. We had a tremendous defection of the 35-plus audience in America moving away from the NBA. I spent 5 years trying very hard to reposition the organization. We had some success. Ended up leaving there for the job I have now, Dentsu. So the reason I left that job was actually I became convinced that I was not going to be able to accomplish what I wanted to in that position. There was when your avocation becomes your job, things seem to change. And I was really pushing hard at that time in collective bargaining. You can collective bargain every 5 years. People don't realize the NBA is unionized. For player reputation and player behavior commitments from the union. We didn't get what we wanted, and I decided, well, that's time to leave. And I also had this tremendous opportunity with Dentsu. So before I start talking about Dentsu, let me show you a little bit. I think presentations are more fun when you have sight, sound, and motion. Here's a little bit of the campaigns over this 15-year period that some of you may remember. Some of you may be too young, but it starts off with Toyota as an import and how we transitioned their communications, and then we go into some of the other places I work. It should be a little entertaining.
A few months ago, something new burst on the American scene, the Toyota Camry. Experts were impressed.
Happy performance with fuel economy. U.S. News and World Report.
And it's got room.
Technical tidbits and thoughtful touches. Car and Driver.
And it's got room.
A landmark vehicle. The Christian Science Monitor.
The 1985 Family Camry from Toyota. Boy, has it got room.
You can see my influences, right?
There's a company that builds more than 1 million vehicles a year in places called Indiana and Kentucky. One that has 10 plants, from the foothills of West Virginia to the Pacific coastline. What company is this? Toyota. A company that, along with its dealers and suppliers, has helped create hundreds of thousands of U.S. jobs. A company proud to do its small part to add to the landscape of America.
I know how. I am able. I'm part of this crazy mix of people and machines. I know how. I can dance with the buttons and the levers and the wires. I'm the future. I know how. Canon.
At BASF, we don't make the sunscreen, we make it stronger. We don't make the helmet, we make it tougher. We don't make the bridge, we make it more durable. We don't make the car, we make it more colorful. We don't make a lot of the products you buy, we make a lot of the products you buy better. BASF, the chemical company.
Listen, Doc, I really love her, but she definitely has commitment issues. She loves me, then she leaves me for 3 years, then she comes back to me. Now she can't make up her mind.
Tim, are you connecting emotionally?
I'm a pretty emotional guy, Doc.
Come to think of it, I remember the trophy has been with others.
I'm not listening. La 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 la. I can't hear you. La 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 la.
There's 1,000 reasons to love this game. What are yours?
I love this game because basketball is the biggest show in town.
2 words. Kevin Garnett.
Stephon Marbury. Keel O'Neal.
So much passion, sweet emotion.
Shot blocked, taken by McClure. McClure to finish. Good!
What's better than playoff basketball? Nothing.
Anybody remember any of those campaigns? No? Yeah, well, some. The NBA job was fun. My kids hated when I quit that job. But so I have transitioned out of all of the client side, making a transition to an agency. And Dentsu is just not your normal agency. It's a different kind of company. It's located in Tokyo. And let me try and explain very briefly what the differences are. First of all, we're bigger than most. And we're not really an agency. We're much more of a entertainment and media company. We're a $17 billion organization, about 16,000 employees. We've got 102 offices in 26 different countries. We're the largest presence outside of Japan is in China, which strategically is critically important right now. 38 of the Fortune 100 companies are our clients. And we are a company that is completely media neutral. We don't just do advertising. We own media. We own movie production studios. We create content. And then we apply that content in ways that help our clients sell their products. So why did I join Dentsu? And what's Dentsu about? Well, while Dentsu is the largest global agency, right, and it looks global, there's some interesting things about Dentsu that I think make a great case study to think about how a company would approach these challenges. That looks incredibly diverse, doesn't it? Well, unfortunately, we're a $3.5 billion revenue company with less than 10% of our revenues. Well, that slide's wrong, actually. Less than 10% of our revenues outside of Japan, right? 90% of our revenues are in Japan. That's a huge problem. If you're the world's largest agency brand, but yet you're a regional player, the one thing you have to learn in the way business is today, if you're a regional player, that's also known as you're a target. Business has globalized. And so Dentsu, critically for its future, it's a 107-year-old company, must globalize its operations. Otherwise, we're going to become part of someone else's global operations. The other core challenge for Dentsu that really interested me was the fact that the U.S. being the world's largest marketing services market, the world's largest market, they have very little, almost no presence. And they really wanted to grow. So they convinced me that they had a commitment to growth outside of Japan. My question was, after 107 years, why haven't you done it? So we had a lot of discussions before I went there. You may ask, why me? Well, 14 years at Toyota. Toyota's their largest global client. 3 years at Canon. Canon's their second largest global client. And their third pillar of Dentsu's business, as I mentioned, in creating content, is sports. Every Olympic Games, other than China and the 88 Games in Seoul, has been produced by Dentsu. We own half of the inventory for the FIFA World Cup. We own all the World Track Championships. Basically, we are the world's largest sports marketing company as well. So when you look at my rather eclectic past, you can see that it was building towards something, and I deeply believe it was building towards the job I have now. I didn't know it, I didn't plan it, but it happened. And I think all of it happened in such a way to make me prepared for what I'm doing now. And, you know, this is a critical point. When I say I'm, my past in Toyota, my past in Canon is important, it's critically important to Dentsu. They have an amazing commitment to client service. And so they were very interested in me for that. I look at this issue as a problem. Dentsu's not going to globalize simply by following its Japanese clients and Japanese brands around the world. If we're going to globalize, we're going to end up having to have the skills and capabilities to service global clients and activate our network globally. And that's been a key change in the last 2 years that's come into the thinking of the senior management, and actually they've been very supportive of. So these are Dentsu's challenges, but I talked to Dean Gaglio before, and I showed him a tape. He said he had seen it. I don't know if a lot of you have seen it, but in 2006, I was one of the early adopters playing around on YouTube, and I found a video, and it really demonstrated to me why I had to change, why I had to get into the broad-based services business, not just tied to any one company, because of the pace of change that's happening in our industry. The media fragmentation and how people are actually marketing and reaching each other is changing on a daily basis. And I really became convinced that Dentsu was the kind of company that had opportunities to be a game-changing play, to really set itself apart in the way that Henry Ford set Ford apart with the invention of the assembly line. I don't know if you've seen this, but I'm going to play a short video. It's only a couple of minutes. But if you're not going to pay attention to anything else that you hear there, and if you haven't seen this, pay attention to this, because it impacts everyone here. Whether you're going to work in marketing or not, it's something that's important. Kind of amazing, isn't it? You know, I think there's two reactions people usually have to this abridged clip. There's an 8-minute version that runs around. It either frightens them or inspires them. And to me, I get inspired. When you have that kind of a change occurring, you can do great things. Nothing's set in stone. But you have to develop a process of thinking that can allow you to take advantage of change and be comfortable with it. And for me, it was the deciding factor in why I wanted to go to a company like Dentsu on the client services side as opposed to any one particular company or industry, because I felt I was ready to play in this game and play in a big way. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll see why I think Dentsu is going to be a game-changing company. So what happened? I took over in 2006 a company called DCA. At that time, Dentsu was so reticent in its global expansion that it wouldn't even give overseas offices its name because they were afraid that they may have to shut them down. They didn't want to take the bad PR of shutting down an office with the Dentsu name on it. The company was about $14 million in revenues, and in the United States it was ranked 157 by revenues. Last year, 2007, so about 18 months in, we've moved 100 places, and more than tripled our revenues. And it's just a start. By the end of this year, we're going to be moving the needle even more. So what to do? Here's kind of the case study section. First thing I insisted is we rebranded the company as Dentsu. If Dentsu's making a global commitment, you have to put your name on the door. Secondly, you have to hire local management. Believe it or not, I was a big change for Dentsu. 107-year-old company, all of those offices all the way around the world. Until I came in 2006, they had never hired a local CEO or a local manager to run any operation outside of Japan. They had always had some board member from Japan come over on a 5-year tour. An amazing way to inhibit your growth. Very insular thinking company. The exciting part is there's new management there that's trying to change everything, and being a part of that, it just gets me up in the morning every day. So by doing this, we changed a lot of our industry's perceptions. We've become a player. I'm out speaking all the time. And we've won some business, as George was kind enough to say. How'd we do that? Well, this is a talent business. It's just like sports. You got to have the goods. You can have all the relationships in the world. You can be as big as you want to be, but unless you can go through the door and actually do something for someone, you're not going to last, and you're not going to bring value. I created 80% turnover in about a year. That's firing a lot of people. And luckily, I didn't have to fire a lot. I just chased a lot of people out that didn't want to jump over a new bar. And I attracted the kind of people that wanted to be part of this pitch. What I've said to everyone, and what I believe, is we're the world's largest startup, right, in my industry. We're not in someone's garage, right? We've got a couple of blue chip clients on the door, but nonetheless, we're a startup company. We're going to grow like a startup. And frankly, that excites a lot of people. Once you can make them believe it, once you can inspire them to believe it, it sets all sorts of good things in motion. So we've got an all-star lineup and then some, and we're still hiring. I spend probably 25% of my time recruiting people. We consolidated our operations to create a bi-coastal network. Dentsu had a lot of little companies all dotted around servicing clients. I closed a lot of offices. I consolidated into 3 bases, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and headquartered in New York. In New York, we were in this wonderful 5th Avenue office. It was great. Man, 666 5th Avenue. Other than the number, I kind of liked it. Big mahogany walls, and it looked like a great law firm. It's no place to create a creative business, first of all. And so we relocated down to Tribeca, and I reset my cost structure by about 70%. For those of you who know this business, there's 2 things, right? You pay your people, and you have your facility costs. This gave us a big advantage as we moved on, and I put all that money into new business growth. And this is a little bit of an older slide, but we can add Coca-Cola now to our roster. We just signed an agreement with them to take over their global branding out of Atlanta. And there's a couple more things coming down the line that, since this is a public forum, I probably won't talk about. But we're moving very rapidly as a company. And we're buying companies. That's a big part of our strategy. I bought a small Gen Y company that exceeds in new media targeted towards millennials in San Francisco, added that to our San Francisco operations. They're called Attic. And the results have been pretty good. Right? In 2006, we were about $21 million. We were about $3 million in the hole from a profit perspective when I got there. And the forecast that we started the year with, since we're a public company, I stick to that forecast because we started the year was to go from $14 million to $50 million in revenue and to be a plus $300 million top line company. I can tell you right now, as I start the 4th quarter, these numbers have already been exceeded. We're about $400 million, and we're at $67 million at the end of 3 quarters. We're moving fast in a market that's as challenging and difficult and as painful as I've ever seen. The way we're doing it is we're changing our business model. We're not just, the whole point in our business is to respond to that tape of all the changes and shift from being a company that starts with an idea of what it's selling. What we sell is solutions that are completely neutral, and largely they're shifting more and more to digital business. What do I have next here? Yeah, fastest growing agency. We grew at 120% last year. We're going to grow at 100% clip for probably the next 5 years. By 2012, we're going to be a $1.2 billion company. And we're going to do it at the expense of our competition. It's a fun thing to be a part of. Let me see this back a second. All right, so what I want to show you in a second is some of the work we're doing. And because of the format we're in, presentations need to have some sight, sound, and motion, right? So I'm going to show you a bunch of TV commercials that you've probably seen or maybe haven't yet seen if you're not in our audience. But the key point is how the change has occurred in our transition as a company is that in 2005, Dentsu in America did about 1% of its revenues on digital-related business. Digital meaning website, digital meaning banners, interactive, social networks, all of the new media. Now it's about 30% of my business. We made that transition in 2 years by changing our people, changing our offering, and being ready to respond to what clients were looking for. So while I'm going to show you some work and some campaigns that are all television-based, believe me, television is only one part of an integrated campaign, and more, everything starts with the internet at the center, with new media at the center. It's no longer a separate function. There's no question about digitalization. Digitalization is not new media, right? That's mainstream now, and that's something that the tape I showed you before really demonstrates. Hopefully you like some of this stuff. All of this stuff won awards. This is our award reel. We won some things in Cannes and other places.
Can a car company grow in harmony with the environment? Why not? At Toyota, we're not only working toward cars with zero emissions, we're also striving for zero waste in everything else we do. Because the best way to have an impact on the environment is to have as little impact as possible.
The world could use a little more red vines.
Excuse us?
Hi. Hi.
Would it be okay to take a photo?
Go ahead, definitely.
Thank you.
Hi,
Dolce. Love you.
So cute.
Can I take a picture?
Yeah, sure.
Can you lift him up a little higher?
Him?
Would it be all right if I got a picture?
Yeah, why not?
Okay, great.
Right here. Make every shot a power shot.
Here we are. We got XBs and TC, XDs and XAs, performance mods, rims, custom paint. It is that which makes us different that brings us together.
So, thank you very much. Yeah, that was like a commercial pod. I'm so surprised no one went out to the bathroom or went and got a sandwich or something. But those campaigns have done very well for us. But again, I want to emphasize that television is only one element of what we do. But our company's a buzz right now. The industry's talking about us. When you're a company that is the world's largest brand, but you've never really tried in the world's largest market, and you decide to try, you're going to kick some people around in the sandbox. And we're doing that, and my competitive nature comes out. We're going to continue to do that, but we're going to do it the right way. We're creating work that works for clients. And so in 2009, let's see, what's next? Just keep watching us. We're going to continue to attract new talent. When I got here in 2006, I would call people up. I remember I called this really, really well-known creative director whose name will be remain unknown, and he actually just laughed when I said who I was and what I was interested in. Now I'm getting flooded with resumes. It's been a great shift, and I feel great about it. We're going to buy some more companies, and we're going to continue to acquire new business. We have the talent pool, and we have some momentum, but we're not going to move as rapidly as we need to without further acquisitions. And so if I spend 25% of my time now on recruiting new people and implementing a culture and a vision as they join the company, I probably spend 50% of my time on looking at and speaking with companies that I think may be appropriate to add to the Dentsu family. And then what happened this summer kind of added new challenges to me. As George mentioned, I was named the first non-Japanese or foreign member of the board for all intents and purposes. And what's happened since then is the last couple of months, most of the operations in Latin America and Europe have now been reorganized to report to me. So I'm not only running a holding company, an operating company called Dentsu America, I'm running a holding company that holds all the operating companies in Latin America, Europe, and now in the U.S. And so I have to create a network, and that's going to be a big challenge. I think the key is creating a model here in the U.S. that we have a nice 2-year start on. And if we can generate the strength here in the United States, it's from that launching pad that we will connect with and integrate our Latin American, South American, and European operations. It's a lot of simultaneous engineering, but we have a very clear goal. Top management has said that they want 30% of our revenues from outside of Japan by 2012. It's a tall order, but we're on pace. In fact, we're a little bit ahead of the pace. All right, here it comes. So what? Right? So what should you take away from this? What insight can I offer as both a Notre Dame grad, as a CEO of a company that is growing and part of a global organization? There's a couple, but there's one in specific I want to speak to you about. And I think it's critical. I believe it. I've believed it for about 15 years, and I think this thinking has been instrumental in allowing me to do what I've been doing. And that is, I don't view that I'm in the marketing business. I don't view that I'm in PR. I don't do digital. I'm not a manager. I'm not a CEO. I'm in the influence business. That's what I do. That's ultimately anybody that operates in this sphere should be thinking about. You're in the influence business, right? to the degree that you can, you have to think of things that way. The job is not to create a tremendous paper for your management class. It's to understand the concepts, right? The job is not to create a great website for Toyota. It's to have that website eventually motivate and influence people's actions to purchase or be more loyal to the product. Ultimately, everything we do is about influence. And what I've learned, and I believe, and it's kind of a combination of reading and thought and experience, there are 3 lasting ways you can influence people. As a manager, as a father, as a friend, as a student, as a teacher, there's 3 dynamics at work. As a brand, right? You have to understand these 3 dynamics, right? Those are the 3 things that will determine whether or not you can successfully influence someone else, right? Fear, right? A very effective influencer, right? Intimidation works great. Understanding people's fears are very, very important. Transactions, equally important, right? If you're going to sell something to somebody, it has to have value, right? If you do this, I'll do that. That's a way to get to influence. Problem with fears and transactions are, if you rely on them too heavily, you won't get the lasting influence you really want with people. Whether it's your brand, whether it's people that you want to lead, whether it's your children, whether it's your wife. If fear and transaction, if the only way you're going to influence people is the communist countries in the third world have used fear as a motivator for 50 years, right? It hasn't worked very well as far as an economy. And transactions, if your influence is only based upon the price you can deliver at this moment to that person, that means that if somebody else can offer a better transaction, you're not going to keep that business for a long time. So the key, in my view, is inspiration, right? Finding the way to inspire people and increase your ability to lead people through an inspiration is critical in what we do. So I've, over the years, developed 8, let's call them traits, let's call them principles. But in our company, these 8 traits are on people's performance reviews. And I really think ultimately developing these capabilities and applying them to any specific subject that you want to, any specific subject you're learning, will get you the influence that you want and ultimately the success that you seek. Let me begin with persuasion, right? You've got to be persuasive. The best way to be persuasive is you have to tell people why. Why are you trying to convince them of what you're trying to convince? What's your point of view and what supports it, right? You have to be persistent. I don't know how many times I've dealt with a manager or someone in my downline organization who said, I tried that. You've got to try it again, right? It's the persistent application of what you believe in and being willing to continue to go after it, I think is ultimately a key to influence. Consideration is important, guys. What I mean by that is think. You got to think, right? You got to think before you do, and you can't just think about what you care about. Ultimately, in influencing others, whether it's making an effective ad or communicating to an audience, you have to think about what they need. You have to think about what they're thinking. You have to think about whether or not they believe you or not. And you also have to think about whether you're right. Am I right? Am I willing to change? Only through persistent willing to challenge yourself through deep thinking can you end up being influential. If you think deeply enough, you'll develop knowledge. And knowledge is critical. I got to tell you, I go to a lot of conferences. I go to a lot of places, and I'm in a lot of meetings with people who are either trying to convince me of something or are trying to present themselves in ways, and you can tell when they're faking it. You can tell when someone's mailing it in or when they really, really have deep, intimate knowledge of the subject they're talking about. And what's worse is, they know, right? It will always undermine your confidence if you know you don't know, right? Seeking knowledge is incredibly important. I've played on teams my whole life. I can't think of any trait more important than acceptance. What I mean by acceptance is what allows you to temper your persistence. There are some people, there are some brands, there are some clients who are never going to be what you expect them to be. Right? Learning to discern what you can influence and what you can't is an important part of this. And then also learning not to just throw the people away, accepting people for what they are. I use this analogy a lot I'm glossing over a lot of this. I have a whole presentation that I give as an orientation to our new employees about the importance of being influential. The example of acceptance I use is why one of the reasons why I didn't do well here as a basketball player? Because I couldn't accept Digger Phelps. I could not accept Digger Phelps. And Digger and I locked horns from the very beginning, and I think it was, as I look back now with my gray hair, the biggest problem I had with Coach Phelps, he was a great coach, coached some great games, we had great talent on the team, is that he deeply believed that the national championship was in the next recruiting class. Right? And I deeply believe the national championship is won with the team you got on the floor. When you end up, and you're going to end up as managers, you're going to end up in your lives with having to deal with less than optimum conditions. And learning to accept and recognize who can do what, and then organize that in a way is very powerful, particularly if the people you know need the acceptance, feel accepted. Right? The dynamic of communication changes dramatically based upon what the person who you're speaking to thinks you think about them. Right? If the person you're speaking to thinks you don't like them, or if the person you're speaking to thinks you don't respect them, or you think they're stupid, or you don't pay attention to them, their reception of what you've got to say is going to be completely different if the inverse was true. I get off on this a little bit, except I'll move on. We can ask questions later. Quickly, all this stuff sounds like soft, right? There's 3 hard things you got to do to be influential. You have to have discipline. It means you set standards and you hold yourself to them, right? There are standards. You hold yourself to them, and ideally you try to create a scenario and find an organization where people hold themselves to standards where you couldn't possibly impose them reasonably on them. I believe I'm standing on top of an organization that has that going for itself right now. I've got people. I come in at 7:30 every morning. Invariably, once or twice a week, I've got people who have spent all night. Did I ask them to? No. They're holding themselves to a standard I couldn't possibly impose upon them. And they do it because they have an internal self-discipline. Develop that discipline, you can be very influential. Consistency. By this I don't mean what Thoreau talks about as like the hobgoblin of small minds. What I mean there is, if you want to influence someone, they better know what to expect from you without variation. Right? That it doesn't change when you get in a tough spot. That it doesn't change when circumstances change. They know what the rules are, and they know what they can count on from you. It's critically important in ultimately leading people, in creating influence, and critically, all of these things, I apply it a lot to human relationships. Apply all of these to how you brand a company or how you brand a product. They're all equally true. And finally, integrity. Your thoughts got to match your words got to match your actions. You got to live without any incongruence there. That's the insight I would share with you. I'd have a couple others. I call my career, my path, and Dean Gaglio asked me to talk about it, and I'm a little uncomfortable, but if my path says anything is, I'm the most successful failure you're ever going to meet. I came to Notre Dame to be the next Larry Bird. You know, I obviously didn't make it, but also I didn't rationalize it, right? I didn't say, well, yeah, but I got to do this, I got to do that. I didn't do it, right? So, you know, don't fear failure and don't rationalize it. If you find yourself, anybody remember The Big Chill, the great quote from The Big Chill, you know, try to get through the day without a juicy rationalization. You can't do it. But make sure when you're rationalizing about what you're doing, make sure your rationalizations are pushing you to do something, not talking you out of taking an action. It should be motivated towards action. Be horizontally directed. I think if my timeline says anything to you, and as people who are about to enter the workforce, let me explain what I mean here. Guys, if you want to be influential in your career, influence is created by grabbing as many experiences as you can, right? Being horizontally directed. When I got to Japan, I did everything I could to touch everything I could to make people know I wanted to be involved. And I've done that my whole career. What I've noticed now in the millennials, excuse me if I call you that, is you're better trained, you're smarter than certainly my generation coming out of Notre Dame, without a doubt. But what I find is that there is this trait of people wanting to be vertically directed, meaning they'll come in and say, yeah, I can do that, and I can do this too. And I would like to do that, but I'm not so interested in this. But if I do all of this, where will it lead me? Show me the path. Where's the ladder? There's about, I don't know, Sam told me that there's going to be about 170 people in this auditorium, probably a little less. In my opinion, there's probably, of 170, there's probably 17 of you who are going to be able to approach your career that way and have the success you want, right? I wasn't in that lucky 10% who could go in and call the shots. Say, here, if I do this, if I do this, if I do this, I'll move up. Most of you are going to have to be horizontally directed. Most of you are going to have to, you know, and I would advise all of you to really focus on getting involved in as many things as you possibly can as you enter the workforce and being willing to do anything, because guess what? You're never going to know what your experience is going to lead to. You're never going to know how it's going to build. Anybody ever see the movie Signs? I call my career either, you know, signs related, and I deeply believe it. There's a divine providence or something that's been guiding my path the whole time. I didn't see it at the time. I think that's the way you have to expect your careers to go. And then the last thing I'll talk about is again, as you go through your careers, strive to be influential. Not to be expert on anything, but to make sure you're influential. And then secondly, allow yourself to be inspired by someone, right? I've had the good fortune to have about 10 people I've worked with, some famous, some not, from David Stern to A.G. Toyota, who actually inspired me. Take that leadership, take that inspiration, learn from it, and then pass it on. So with that, I think we're going to open to a Q&A. But prior to doing that, I just have one question. I want to start with a question. Tim, have I embarrassed you yet? When Timmy was 4 years old, we were standing outside the bookstore. That's Dillon Hall on the right. And he told me he was going to go to Notre Dame and he was going to play basketball here. So I just wanted to say, way to go, Tim. You did all right. All right. Let's ask some questions.
Okay, as before, we'd like you to come down and use the microphones for the questions. Okay, I'd like to start out with one question for you, Tim. You showed a couple of ads for different cars, Toyotas, and also the, I forgot the other model that was
Lexus.
Lexus.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, your job is, or your company's job is to improve the market share for both of those companies. Does that create a conflict of interest, and how do you handle that in the company?
Well, fortunately, in this specific case up here in the United States, you can only work for one car company at a time. And both those, Lexus and Scion, are both owned by Toyota, who's my client. So there is no conflict there. Scion, I bet this group all knows what Scion is, I hope, right? It's the youth model of Toyota, and Lexus is the luxury model. But an interesting point, very different here in the United States from in Japan. In Japan, there are no category conflicts. And the reason is, in the United States, I have a contract with Toyota. I'm their AOR on certain products, agency of record. That means I can't take other business. In Japan, there is no agency of record system. You can work for any company. In fact, our whole building, that 47-story building I showed you, is designed to keep competitive companies apart. They have 40 different elevators so that clients can go up and never have to meet each other in competitive categories. And while that sounds amazingly different, how do you keep the competitive conflicts aside, that really is driven by cultural difference. Clients over there never tie up with one agency. So if you're working for Toyota over there as part of Dentsu, almost every major new piece of business or new model, it's a pitch. It's not assigned. So you have to compete for it over and over. So it's a little bit of a different model. But in our case, one car company, Toyota, and the Toyota family is my client here in America.
Hi, my name is Ben Queen, and I was wondering how your company is positioning itself against the established marketing companies that are already entrenched within the markets you're looking to grow into. What kind of competitive responses are you looking to see from them?
Yeah, so the positioning is really important for us, both because we haven't played in this market for a long time and people don't know what Dentsu is. So first we have to begin oftentimes with some education. People know it, and they know it as this kind of Asian powerhouse, but they don't really know what it's known for here. And the key way I'm differentiating this company from what I see is out there is based on this influence model. And what I believe has happened in this business is that there are agencies that have kind of specialized, right? So there are agencies out there that are digital agencies, and so when you go to talk to them, any problem you have, the solution they're going to give you is what they can do, right? It's like you give a little boy a hammer, they find that the whole world needs pounding. Digital agencies think the solution to everything is building you a website, right? Big traditional agencies think the solution is always the 30-second spot. It's always television, right? And television's on the top of the hierarchy, and you work your way down. And I think most of the industry went too far in that direction, and they really specialized. What Dentsu's always done has had a kind of client-focused mentality and always supported media neutrality. So essentially, the way Dentsu got so big was they put the client in the middle, and we added functionalities around, in our company to handle almost any problem, so that we didn't have to come to them and say, all right, here, we can do a 30-second spot and we do TV really well, so your solution is TV. We always start in a media neutral way, and I think that's really differentiating in the market. Secondly, as a guy that was on the client side, and I worked with 17, 18 different agencies in my career, what happens is, and the way I'm differentiating this company is we will design in the integration. The biggest difference that I've noticed going from being a CMO to being a CEO of a marketing services company is I never realized when I was on the client side that my agency thought I was thinking about them all the time, right? That I was thinking about the advertising, right? About 10%, maybe less, of my day was spent thinking about advertising. I had distribution issues, I had warring departments, I had pricing issues to deal with. And I think what that creates, and I think that understanding, it's something I always appreciated when I was a client of Dentsu, the agency's role is to integrate all of the things for the client, right? Even if we're working with other agencies. So right now, for example, as Dean Gaglio mentioned, we do a lot of work for Lexus. But we also work with their PR company that isn't owned by Dentsu. We work with their digital company that doesn't work by Dentsu. Most agencies won't do that. So I think the positioning we're taking is client first, right? And we do the integration, right? And from that position, we're really can credibly talk about, media neutrality and offering a solution that works.
Advertising has been very challenged by the internet, and web advertising, like newspapers, are having more trouble bringing in revenue and such these days. Looking into the next 10 to 20 years, with a lot of new technologies coming into everyday lives of the way people live, what are the ways or the visions that you have to become more relevant as an advertising agency?
Frankly, I think advertising is dead. I'm not a big believer in the old advertising model. I think what exists is technology, access, and content. And we're in that business. And so what's going to change, I believe, is there's going to be, and it's already happened, it's almost impossible to aggregate large numbers of eyeballs anymore. Right? The media fragmentation has occurred across the board. Sports content can still draw. Elections can still draw. But it's very rare. And so what's happening, and another reason why I'm really excited about being part of the Dentsu organization, because a lot of the implementation of the new technologies are really occurring in Asia first, is you are going to be able to customize your advertising world. So largely it's going to probably be done through some device like your PDA or cell phone. Already in Japan, Dentsu has anybody ever heard of QR codes? Anybody ever seen a QR code? All right, QR codes are these replacements for like barcodes. And they're like symbols. They're these little squares. You find them on packages, you find them on products, you find them on posters now all throughout Asia. And what you do is you go up with if I'm walking down the street and I see a restaurant I like, and I take a picture of the front of the restaurant, the poster out there, there'll be a little QR code. The picture automatically, right, will connect me to the website, allow me to get a reservation, and it does it all for free because this device has changed in Asia from a subscription-based model to an advertising-based model. So nobody over there pays for their time on these devices. They use so things like QR codes are coming, right? People will still be enjoying television, but you're going to be able to, I think, select whether or not you want to reduce your costs for the delivery of content by accepting advertising. You're going to do it on your PDA. You're going to do it on your big screen. You're going to live your life a little bit differently. So companies that are still kind of, I'm in an industry with a lot of companies that are still selling buggy whips at the time of great change to mechanization and motorization. This business is changing on almost every 3 months. Again, to think about, I'm running a $400 million top number operation, and in really less than a year, the mix of my revenues went from 1% to about 32% digital. Right? That's tremendous change. And I think it's largely being driven by both technology and then the way people are leading their lives. So I think the days of these big, beautiful, I was up in the helicopter for that Scion shot, I think those days are numbered. Those days of these big, sweeping, beautiful vistas, and guys there thinking they're making a 30-second movie, and I think those days are numbered. I think it's getting much more about ROI. It's much more about customization, and most of what I do for a living is going to be pulled by my audiences, not pushed by us.
Okay, next question.
I was actually wondering if you could evolve on that whole, you believe that the championship is in the team now as opposed to the next recruiting class. I was hoping you could evolve on that and then say if you still believe that now.
Yeah, I believe it in my soul that you have to work with what you have. And one of the hardest things as a manager is deciding when what you have isn't good enough. So yes, I still believe in it, but I'm also a CEO who just, as I admitted to, created 80% turnover in an organization, right? And most of that was self-selection. Most of that was talking about, here's where we're going, guys. This is what we're going to do to have to get there. If you want to be part of it, jump on board. If you don't want to be part of it, you're not going to be happy here. And so, thankfully, if you communicate that kind of vision and you can rally people to it, the times where you have to make that difficult decision of saying, this person doesn't measure up, become fewer. But it happens. But to be honest, I don't know how to operate any other way. I don't know how any manager, any coach could operate any other way. You've got to play the game now. So what are you telling me? It starts 0-0 and we're going to wait till next year to see if we can win? You only got 40 minutes, right? You got to play the game now. And you got to play with what you have to play with. Yeah, simultaneously, you've got to be setting up what you're doing in the future. But I'm always the person who's going to focus on the now, not, hey, I'll tell you how great we're going to be 3 years from now. And I think that's the difference. I think managers today, anybody know how long the average CMO stays in his job? 19 months. You got 19 months as a CMO of a major, Fortune 500 company to have an impact, to have some influence. What are you going to say? Oh, I didn't get my team aligned right. Recruiting's a hard thing to do. So, look, I'm not a big believer in black and white on things, right? I think there's gray areas, but on this one, I'm much more apt to try and develop the team I have now to move forward and not think that the only way to go is to kind of discard what we have here. I mean, I hope that the people that work for me feel that. There's nothing worse than working for someone who you think doesn't believe in you. There's nothing more dispiriting. And frankly, even if I felt that way about some of the people that work for me, I would not let them know it until I change them.
The college demographic, our generation, has been notorious for being very hard for companies to target because, ever since we started growing up, we've been bombarded by newspapers, TV, internet, everything. What kind of innovative solutions has Dentsu developed to help or to target us?
Well, that whole Scion campaign that you saw, anybody ever see it on TV? Scion is a youth model designed to try and lower the average age of Toyota purchasers. So they created a whole different channel, a whole different section. 97% of Scions are purchased online. Don't even go to the dealer. You go to pick it up. Because we know millennials don't want to go and talk to the guy in the polyester pants. Right? So I think obviously what's happening with the millennials is totally related to what I mentioned before about the changes in technology, because you guys are driving the changes in technology. You're using the applications. So I think a case study would be, for us anyway, the best example is Scion. What we did over the past 3 years with Scion, Toyota had across its fleet the average age of a Toyota buyer was 42. We've worked that down to 33 solely by the Scion brand. Right? The average age of a Scion buyer is about 22. And what I'm doing actually is we target 12-year-olds. I'm on Webkins with Scion. Anybody know what Webkins is? Dan, tell them what Webkins is. Right? So I think what's happening is marketing is starting to get more direct, starting to go where people, where youth is, and is allowing them to kind of pull the information rather than push. Nothing in our experience turns people off more than in your generation than feeling you're getting sold the way your parents got sold to. And Scion's a great example. Go to Scion.com, check out littledeviants.com. It's a little branding website there. You'll see what I mean. I think you'll find that that's how we're doing things in completely different ways, and some of which that guys with gray hair really have to be open-minded to understand. I mean, I've got a whole division out in San Francisco. I think it's It's about 22% of our business, and I think the oldest or most experienced person out there is 31. Got to trust them.
Okay, we have time for one more question.
Okay. You talked a lot about acceptance and going into a new company, discerning what can be accepted. Being an American or one of the first, foreigners in a Japanese firm, maybe you can touch on an example of where something you strongly believed in, you just know is just not going to be accepted, or you can't do that change.
Yeah, the part of an experience, whether you're interested or not, that I would recommend to everyone is to somewhere in your career get into a bicultural situation, get into some international experience, because that's where your acceptance is really going to be tested. And for me personally, if you think about it, I'm damn near 7 foot tall, right? I'm an American, and I'm walking around a Japanese organization. It's not like I'm really going to, blend in, right? So I guess the best example and why I'm so fired up about Dentsu right now and the leadership, I'm working for the president of the company, a gentleman named Tetsuo Takashima. And when Takashima-san was particularly enlightened me, when he decided to put me on the board, let me give you the message he gave me. He said, "Tim, you're going to make a really poor Japanese executive." He said, "And if you try to take your cultural experience and blend in and make everyone comfortable, you won't be doing what I want you to do. Your job is to come in and be an American. I think you'll be a great Dentsu executive, but don't try to become a Dentsu board member by imitating the other board members." He was kind of encouraging me to be different. And so sometimes, when that whole issue of acceptance and the bicultural situation, sometimes your role is to educate. There's all sorts of teachable moments. I won't tell you which company I was with, but it was a Japanese company, and I was younger in my career, and I was with a very senior Japanese executive, and we were interviewing someone for a relatively important job, and the guy didn't know how to interview. And he asked some questions that, I actually was stunned. They were so inappropriate. And at the end of the interview, I kind of said, "Well, thank you very much. You have the job." I kind of didn't want any legal hassles. You pull the person out, and you have two choices: explain what they did wrong and attack it head on, or let it go and let it be someone else's ticking time bomb. And so I think when I say acceptance, it doesn't mean, to excuse the expression, accept everyone's crap, right? It means accept the people for who they are, right? Accept what they can do really, really well, and understand where they're not really strong. But ultimately, that doesn't mean you ignore it. You try to coach them through it. You try to make them better, and that's what I mean about acceptance. I think it's not so much a management attitude to project acceptance. I think it's something that you have to have people feel. You're never going to get the best out of people. You're never going to get your best out of people if they're playing scared, if they don't know where they stand, if they think that there's an agenda somehow that isn't in their best interest, right? So if you can create that kind of environment of acceptance, people generally will perform better.
Okay, thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you again.